Hi everybody, today I am going to be taking a look at the Archer and Olive Acrylograph paint pens. These are water-based acrylic paint pens that are meant to be used in their notebooks with their 160 GSM paper. I wasn't originally going to look at these for a couple of reasons. The first reason being that I don't really use paint pens in my planner, and the super thick bullet journal notebook pages are just not for me. That's why I stopped using an Archer and Olive. But I had a bunch of you ask me if I would take a look at them. The second reason I wasn't going to look at them was because they're really expensive. They're hella expensive. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But a bunch of you asked me to take a look at them, and as I have had a lot of experience with paint pens, not as a planner person, but as a Trader Joe's sign artist, where most of the big display boards, the chalkboards that we didn't actually use chalk on those. We used acrylic paint pens, and the brands we used the most were Posca, which I happen to have this guy here, and Woodcraft. So I have a lot of experience with how paint pens work. At least that way I can compare these to the experiences I've had with other paint pens. I have all three color sets, and I bought the 0.7 millimeter tip, which is the skinny, more writing style tip. They also have a 3 millimeter bullet tip that can be used for filling in bigger areas. This Posca pen here is actually a 2.5 millimeter tip. It's a little smaller than the other Archer and Olives, but it'll give you an idea of what it might look like. I didn't buy both sizes because I wanted to check out all the colors, and again, these are super expensive, and as much as I'm willing to spend money to review things for you guys to let you know how you might want to spend your money or not spend your money, I wasn't about to spend that much money. One of these sets, which is 8 colors plus a white and a blending pen, is $32. $32, you guys. God damn. These pens better wipe my ass for me. And I'm going to be doing a lot of comparisons to Posca, at least in terms of price and such. I'm not going to be comparing the color ranges, and I'm not going to be comparing like how they work because I don't have enough Posca pens and I wasn't about to buy more pens for this video. But just giving you a heads up in terms of if you really want acrylic paint pens, at least here's a little bit of basic information for you. So the total number of colors that we have with the Acrylograph pens is 25. There are 8 different colors in each set, so it's 24 total plus the white. I'm not counting the blending pen as a color. The blending pen is just that. It's a blending pen. The Posca pen, specifically PC-1MC, and I'll put this information in the description box, is the 0.7 millimeter tip that is very similar to this tip. They also have 25 colors in that set. Their full set on Amazon is $60. To get the full set of these pens, you have to spend $96. It's a big difference. For Posca in general, just to give you a heads up, they actually have 8 different tip sizes, and they have a total of 59 colors. Not all of the colors are available in that smaller tip size. 8 metallic, 6 fluorescent colors, and 8 glitter colors. So if you're really into the idea of acrylic paint pens, I would not start with these. I would actually start with Posca. I will tell you right now that these pens are fantastic. They work really well, and they've been around for a long time. So there is a lot of reviews available online. There's a lot of information available online, and they're very trusted. They're not my favorite brand of acrylic paint pen, though. My favorite brand is called Woodcraft, but they're a little bit harder to find. So that's the comparison. The reason I'm leading off with this, despite however I might feel about these individual pens, is that I can't in good conscience tell you to go spend $32 for a set of 8 colors plus a white and a blending pen when there are less expensive options out there, because that's really expensive. But you may want these. You may want them because you want to support this small business. You may want them because you like the aesthetic of them. Maybe you like the colors of them, whatever the case may be. So let's take a look at the pens themselves. Now, the first thought I had when I got these was that this packaging is mildly ridiculous. So this is the packaging of one set. Now I have 3 sets, so I have 3 different sets of packaging here. It has this beautiful gold Archer and Olive. Like, I'll tell you right now, Archer and Olive, I am going to say, is a luxury brand. Their notebooks are pricey. Their pens are pricey. The quality is always there. I can't hate on their quality, and their packaging is always gorgeous. This is gorgeous packaging, but it's a little excessive. You'll see what I mean in a second. So you open it, and here is your blending palette if you want to use the blending pen. And what you can do with paint pens is hold them down and a puddle of paint will grow, and you can use that with a paintbrush to actually paint with. I used to do that all the time at Trader Joe's. So the blending palette is like a non-porous shiny surface this isn't really necessary. You can use any non-porous surface. You can use a ceramic plate. You can use a stamp block, like an acrylic stamp block. You can use a CD that you're not using anymore. So this is really not that necessary. So it gives you some information, shake on how you use them and tips for using them. And then you open it, and here are your pens. Again, like I said, this is very fancy packaging, but like excessive packaging. They do say on their website that the packaging is eco-friendly. I don't know if you can recycle this. I don't think this is recyclable. So here is your white pen, your blending pen, and then your colors. This is the primary set. They have two other sets, the tropical set and the jewel set. One of the things that does come with this that I applaud them for is a couple of extra tips, because with paint pens, one of the ways you activate them, and I'll show you that in a minute, is to press them down a bunch of times to get the paint flowing, which can over time fray the tip. So having some extra tips is really helpful, and I appreciate that. Now it gives you some ideas here on how to blend, tips for blending, and that is your giant package. So that's what this looks like. And then we have the jewel selection, which are the darker tones here. And then we have the tropical selection, which are some lighter colors. Now, the reason you would want to use paint pens in a bullet journal, whether it's a white paper one or a black paper one or whatever, is because acrylic paint pens are opaque. If they come off as transparent when you're using them, it's because you haven't shaken them well enough. When you shake them, you're going to hear you'll hear that sound when you shake them with the ball that's in there mixing the paint up. That's important. You want to be able to get the paint super blended so that when you use it, it comes as very dark and opaque. I'm just going to grab one of these pens. I'm just grabbing the red one. This is what the pen looks like. It is a very pretty pen. It has the word acrylograph and the Archer and Olive. It shows you your tip size, and then it gives you a little raised situation here that has your color on it. The cap also has this, although I noticed with one, not in this set, but in one of my sets, this part kept coming off. I've already started all of these pens because it takes 85 years to start paint pens. You take the cap off, there's your tip. When you first get it, the tip is going to be white because it hasn't had the ink yet. But then once you've started it, you'll see the color in it. You put the cap on the other end. You have to kind of push it down, but then once you do, it stays really well. And that's your pen. Now to start one of these pens, what you do is with the cap on, this is important, with the cap on, give it a good shake. Now you can shake it kind of towards the bottom at like this angle if you want to. I tend to shake it a little bit more sideways than that because I have had some explosions with paint pens in my time, and this is just it's a protective measure, let's just say. So you give it a good shake, and you want to shake them anytime you start using them. This is not just to start the pen. When you're using a paint pen, before you start using it for the first time in that session, give it a good shake. Anytime you feel like the paint is starting to be thinner or more transparent, give it another good shake with the cap on, because the paint just continually needs to be like redistributed or whatever. Now then you just use a piece of scrap paper, give it a good shake, take the pen out, and then you press a few times down to get the paint flowing. Now, it will feel like you're doing it for hella days, don't worry, and you'll see it start to happen because the paint will start to come down into the tip. But once you start seeing like the little dots of paint like that, you know it's ready to go. This is a really nice tip for writing. The biggest issue with it that I can see, and that's the same with any paint pen, you're gonna run into this with most acrylic paint pens, is that if there's any texture to the paper whatsoever, and the Archer and Olive paper does have texture, if it gets caught on any tiny bit of texture, it might spatter the paint. So if you're really horrified at the idea of potentially having paint spatters, these pens might be a little difficult for you. And again, this is not the fault of these particular pens. This is something that happens with a lot of acrylic paint pens. Texture can make the paint go flying because you're basically loading a ton of liquid paint into a porous tip. So what I'm going to do first, before we do anything else, is I'm going to show you some swatches, and I'm going to show you these swatches on 3 different kinds of paper. And these are all Archer and Olive notebooks because I am a notebook hoarder. Are all 160 GSM paper. This is the white paper. This is the craft paper. And then we have the black paper. And I want you to see these colors on all of them because they look different on them. No matter how opaque they are, the color of the paper will change the color just a little bit because of the color surrounding it and any color that might happen to come through no matter how opaque it is. So it's important to see kind of how the colors play on all of these. I'm going to stop for a second and show you a problem I've run into with some paint pens. It's not just about transparency. Sometimes tips with paint pens, acrylic paint pens, can be scrapey. And what they do is when you draw a line, instead of getting a solid line, you get two skinny lines with like a scrape down the middle of it. Like, can you see right there how this top one has like that scrapiness to it? I'm already having trouble with this tip, and all I've done so far is swatch this on these papers and one other time. So that's something to pay attention to. This is something I've run into with every paint pen I've ever used. Not every specific pen, but every brand of paint pen I've ever used, which again comes with the territory. But when you're spending this much money on pens, you want to know about stuff like this. So I'm filling it in so you can kind of get a better idea of the color. But as you can see with the yellow, I had some struggles. Here are the colors on 3 different types of paper. Now the cool part is about acrylic paint pens and these specific paint pens is that on the darker papers, they do pop off of it. The biggest thing you run into is that on each paper, there are colors that don't work so well. For example, on the white, obviously the white doesn't work very well. On the black doesn't work very well. And the 2 darkest blues don't really pop very much either. The craft seems to have all of them pop the most. I would suggest that perhaps this brownish color in the jewel tone set is the hardest to see, and that the differences between the yellows are a lot harder to see on the black paper. Now, I maybe should also mention that this set is the top set is the primary, the middle set is the tropical, and the bottom set is the jewel tones in all 3 papers. Now, I'm going to zoom you in because I want you to see the spattering that happened. It'll be easiest to see on the white, but it did happen on the other papers as well. But you can see spattering just in terms of making these little squares. So you can see here next to this color, there's spattering. In the black colors, there's a bunch of spattering around the peach and around the yellow. The other thing you can see is that I had some trouble with transparency with some of these lighter colors. It's most obvious on the black because the black is shining through the paper. And I reshook them and restarted them, and I still had a bit of the trouble. Again, I'm not going to say that these pens are shitty. From using these pens are as good as any other paint pens I've used. They're not revolutionary. They're not phenomenal. They're paint pens. But these problems I'm showing you, the spattering, sometimes the issues with transparency, the scrapiness, that's something you're going to run into regardless of any kind of paint pen that you use, whether it's the Archer and Olive or a different kind. One other issue I ran into was specifically with this color, this darker yellow in the in the tropical set. You can see it here. The difference between the nib of this one and the nib of the one next to it. The tip of this darker yellow pushed in, and I had to use tweezers to get it out. And then every other time I tried to start it, it pushed back in again. I wasn't ready to swap it for a new one. I don't know if it's the tip or the pen, but it bummed me out that I had to be so careful with one of these pens after spending this much money on them. Now, when it comes to the color range itself, the one thing I want to point out is that it is a very lovely color range. There are a whole bunch of choices here. The biggest issues I would run into are that there's a couple of colors in the yellows. Like, I feel like these two yellows, at least on the dark paper, are a little hard to tell apart. There's also a little bit of overlap between some of the blues. There is color differences between them, but it's subtle. So it's a really nice color range. I would say that if you're like, which set you go with if you're gonna buy one is totally dependent on what colors that you like. The last thing that we're gonna do is check out this blending pen, because that's not something I've had any experience with. So I guess what you're supposed to do is put a little bit of ink from one color on the blending palette and then another color, and then use the blending pen to pick it up, use that pen to draw with, and then rinse the blending pen under water so that you can reuse it again. Let's try this out here. So here's the blending pen, which you don't have to shake up. It looks like it feels like it's just a nib. It's just a nib in a pen, that there's no liquid or anything. It's not like there's nothing in it. It's an empty pen with a nib on it. That's the blending pen. So let's do a blend here. What are we gonna do? Let's create, I kind of want to do dark brown with the peach, because I feel like of all the colors here, the browns are kind of the most wanting. So it says to put a couple of drops down of the color on the palette. Actually, we're going to use this burgundy kind of color. Just a couple of drops of that burgundy, and then a couple of drops of the peach right next to it. And then according to the instructions, use the blending pen to mix the colors, apply new color to your page. Well, that's a pretty like mauve. That's pretty. Now let's see how it applies to the page. Let's write mauve. It says ink dries quickly, so work with small amounts at a time. I mean, okay, that works. I'm gonna rinse this. I've got a little squirt bottle. I'm just gonna squirt this puppy and then grab a rag and clean it off. Well, it's cleaned and there's no ink left on it, so that'll work. I don't know. The way I used to blend with paint pens was to just put a little bit of ink on it and just use a paintbrush. So I feel like the blending pen, I don't feel like having a blending pen in every single package just necessarily justifies the cost. Just saying. Now, I will say, as somebody who's used the shit out of paint pens, having a white pen with every set is handy. At least working at Trader Joe's, and we worked on black surfaces a lot, we went through whites at a way faster rate than any other color, because that was like the basic color to use, like using black. Like I would say a white, rather than a blending pen, I would say that it would make me happier if there was a black pen and a white pen in every set, and that they added an additional color, like maybe a mauve, to the series. I don't know. Anyway, so this is kind of just a look at these guys. Like I said, I can't hate on them because they're basically the same as other paint pens I've used. I haven't used their bigger tip, but I'm sure it's probably fine. My biggest suggestion is, if you are feeling a massive itch for a paint pen, if you have an art supply store or a Michaels nearby you, you should be able to go in and pick up a single Posca pen, or if they don't have Posca, a Sharpie water-based pen, which is a acrylic pen. You don't want the Sharpie oil-based. That's a different kind of paint. A Sharpie water-based pen, a Posca pen, a Woodcraft pen, any kind of acrylic paint pen. Not a chalk ink pen, not an oil-based pen. An water-based acrylic paint pen. Pick up one of those somewhere if you have somewhere nearby you and you're able to go in safely and socially distanced, and try one of those to see if you like the format of it, because like with the spattering and everything else, acrylic paint pens can be a little touchy to work with. I do not suggest going out and spending $32 on a set for paint pens, let alone $96 on a full set of them, or even worse, $92 on the whole set with both tip sizes, if you don't know that you like this style of pen. just please don't do that. Like, for the love of God, please don't do that. What I will say is, if you really like this color range and you have the money to spend and you're interested in paint pens and you think you're going to like using them, especially if you work on like darker colored papers and you want to support a brand like Archer and Olive because they're a smaller business, then these pens are not going to do you dirty. But if you're really interested in paint pens and you want to use them, and the brand and the fanciness of them doesn't matter, the fancy package they come in, the name brand, the Instagram, because these are very Instagram worthy pens. If that doesn't matter to you, then buy Posca pens or look up different brands of paint pens. The price on these is ridiculous. So that's my review on these pens. They're nice pens, but there are other pens that are just as nice that you can get for cheaper. So there you go. That's my review. I hope I wasn't too salty, but like, I've spent a lot of time with paint pens, and the packaging, like, these are luxury. These are luxury paint pens. So I don't know how I feel about luxury paint pens. I think in the work I've done in the past, I've gone through paint pens so fast. If I tried to sell my boss on that kind of a price for pens, he'd probably laugh at me. Let me know if there's any pens you want me to take a look at in the comments below. And until next time, my dudes, stay safe, wear your mask, stay healthy, wash your hands, register to vote, and peace out. And don't forget to subscribe. Asta.